Thousands of thoughts like this have been gathering since the resurfacing of what was once the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi River, known as Tulare Lake. The resurfacing of this lake has created a sudden panic amongst the people. While some people are welcoming its revival, others are afraid of what will lie beyond this phenomenon. Well, there is no definite possibility of what will come next, but it's for sure that the lake, which disappeared in the late 19th century, won't be stopped from coming back to life. After being dormant for 40 years, it is now forming back due to an unprecedented amount of winter rain. But what could possibly be the reason behind the draining of this huge lake that stretched to almost 800 square miles? And if it did vanish, what triggered its sudden return to the modern world? This is the story of one of the most significant bodies of water west of the Mississippi River. This is the story of the undead Tulare Lake. Tulare Lake, infamously known as the Phantom Tulare Lake, was one of the most significant bodies of water west of the Mississippi River. It was located in the San Joaquin Valley and existed for thousands of years. Tulare Lake used to be enormous, occupying up to 600 square miles during high water periods and at its peak up to 800 square miles. In contrast to that, Lake Tahoe is about 191 square miles in size, while Los Angeles covers an area of just over 500 square miles. So, how did this big lake come to an end? Before we get into that, it's vital to know where and how it began. Well, the first periodic flooding from the Pacific Ocean occurred 65 million years ago in California's Central Valley. As a result of these floods, the region formed a harbor that opened to the south. Nonetheless, the Central Valley's isolation from the ocean is believed to have occurred about 2 million years ago as a result of sediment accumulation from local flooding and movement of the coastal ranges along the San Andreas Fault. As a result, the Central Valley region ceased to be a bay, and alternately, it started to fill up and drain. The continuous draining and filling alongside the glacial melt turned the salty remains of the bay into a sizable freshwater lake. The lake's formation took place during the Pleistocene epoch, an era which is marked by ice ages and early humans. Hence, approximately 70,000 years ago, Lake Corcoran, also known as Lake Clyde, was formed, marking the culmination of the large lakes in the Central Valley. With a surface extent of up to 19,000 square miles, the lake spanned a large portion of the California Central Valley. To put things into perspective, Lake Ontario is the 5th largest lake in the United States, and one of the Great Lakes on the East Coast, which is roughly the same size as Lake Clyde. In addition to its size, Lake Corcoran has had a significant impact on the environment and topography of Central California and its environs. It gave rise to Corcoran clay, which is used in modern times to create an aquifer layer that holds groundwater and is widely distributed through the Central Valley. It was due to evaporation from this lake. Neighboring mountain ranges such as the Sierra Nevadas and the Basin and Range Province received rainfall. As a result, the construction of other huge lakes generated by rainfall can be attributed to Lake Corcoran. Around 600,000 years ago, prior to its outflow into San Francisco, the Salinas River carried the lake's water into Monterey. Every now and then, the lake's water, which is rich in minerals and fed by glaciers, would overflow, sending its waters to nearby areas via rivers and outlets. This nutrient-rich water fostered a variety of ecosystems, such as wetlands, grasslands, and marshes. But some 400,000 years ago, a movement in the Earth's crust raised the land in the Central Valley and lowered the San Francisco Bay Area. And when fragments of the lake crashed into the coastal mountains, they created deep channels that were eventually carved out by rushing water, rocks, and other materials. And that is how San Francisco Bay came into being. Soon, Lake Corcoran vanished and was never seen again. But after its disappearance, 3 big lakes were born in its place, namely Buena Vista Lake, Kern Lake, and Tulare Lake. Tulare Lake was situated in the Tulare Basin. Following the demise of Corcoran Lake, this replacement lake provided life in the Central Valley's grasslands, wetlands, and marshes for millennia, along with supporting the existence of a variety of species. Water from neighboring mountain ranges such as the Sierra Nevada, Transverse Ranges, and Coast Ranges flooded into the lake for centuries. Runoff water, rivers, and smaller lakes all supplied water to the massive Tulare Lake. Hence, the lake's enormous size was further increased by precipitation and drainage from the nearby mountain ranges. Runoff from nearby Kern and Buena Vista lakes simultaneously flowed northward into the Buena Vista Slough and eventually into Tulare Lake via a naturally occurring sand ridge. These sources all contributed to the lake's plentiful supply of pure fresh water, which allowed it to originate and flourish to such a large extent. For millennia, Tulare Lake was among the largest bodies of water in North America, particularly west of the Mississippi River. But what caused this enormous and biodiverse lake to vanish so abruptly? We all know humans have a long history of disrupting nature, and the disruption of Tulare Lake was also a consequence of humans' greed. The earliest people to live in the Tulare Lake Basin migrated around 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. Due to the abundance of wildlife, water, and plant life in the area, these Native Americans established themselves close to the lake. The indigenous cultures lived in prosperity for millennia around the lake and its tributaries while fishing in the foothills and valleys of the surrounding mountains, as well as along Southern California's coast. But the early 19th century brought massive disruptions to the indigenous people's way of life when the Spanish arrived in the San Joaquin Valley. Around 1808, diseases brought by the Spanish devastated the native tribes. Lieutenant Gabriel Moraga, a Spanish expeditionary, along with his fellow Spanish army officers, sought locations to convert the indigenous population of California. From modern-day Mexico to the United States, the Spanish presence in North America spread rapidly after Moraga's preaching journey. Subsequently, the Spanish population began to increase significantly through conquest and violence. The majority of the regions that now constitute the U.S. were annexed during this expansion period, notably in the Mexican-American War, which occurred from 1846 to 1848. In 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo granted California and other northern states of Mexico to the United States for $10 million, which is equivalent to over $350 million today. For much of Tulare Lake's existence under colonial forces, the region experienced alternating periods of drought and flooding. Periods of flooding would turn the whole landscape of the Central Valley into expansive water, with wetlands bordered by an otherwise arid landscape. The flooding provided nutrients and minerals to the soil, creating fertile farmland for farmers. Simultaneously, the untouched freshwater's seemingly limitless supply was prized for irrigation and farming, but nobody had even a hint of how quickly the supplies would run out due to the reckless and self-centered behavior of a few farmers. Moving forward, extensive irrigation in the Central Valley led to the complete drying up of Tulare Lake for the first time in its long history. The shrinkage of Tulare Lake prompted European settlers to claim the newly emerged farmland in the Tulare Basin. In the process, they constructed infrastructure and modified streams to enhance control over flooding and water flow in and around the lake. The construction of infrastructure that was designed to prevent water overflows transformed the lake bed into farmland, which quickly reduced the size of the lake. As the lake drained, farming and agriculture started increasing, and Tulare Basin became famous for its abundant crops. These days, the region is well known for its tomatoes, grains, fruits, nuts, milk, cotton, and safflower production. After the first 3 years of irrigation farming in the San Joaquin Valley, experts of the time noted that the lake's bounds gradually dwindled. By 1875, the lake's southernmost point had shrunk to just 1 mile across, and the size of the lake continued to decline in the next 5 years. To Tulare Lake was formerly 3 or 4 times larger, spanning an area of 600 to 800 square miles. But by 1888, it had nearly completely rounded out, having shrunk to around 220 square miles and being completely gone by 1895. During the 19th and 20th centuries, the needs of agriculture and irrigation caused almost 95% of the valley's wetlands to disappear. These formerly biodiverse wetlands have since changed significantly, becoming semi-arid deserts in several places. The San Joaquin River watershed, formerly a part of the Tulare Lake Basin, encompasses 2/3 of the land in Northern California, but it only receives 25 to 33% of the precipitation in the area. This is due to water being diverted for agricultural purposes via irrigation technology. Throughout its agricultural history, the Central Valley has exported a significant amount of crops used in Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cuisine. There is also a strong dairy and ranching business in the region. Then, the construction of the Pine Flat Dam began in 1947. Though the dam provided better flood control, irrigation options, and agricultural diversity, it also had a terrible effect on the aquifer that stores groundwater and the surrounding wetland habitats. Also, the dam exacerbated problems within the water system in the Tulare Basin by significantly contributing to the loss of wetlands and the aquifer in the San Joaquin Valley. However, the farmland that was once home to Tulare Lake is now being encroached upon as urban sprawl, contributing to the region's water demand. Due to this, the Central Valley lost approximately 70,000 acres of farmland between 1990 and 2004. The San Joaquin Valley region's water systems are severely strained as a result of this struggle for groundwater. Simultaneously, the Central Valley's extreme need for groundwater for drinking and irrigation has started to negatively impact the ecosystem, causing problems that go far beyond Tulare Lake's disappearance. For starters, research indicates that the overuse of groundwater in the San Joaquin Valley of California has caused some land to sink at a pace of up to 1 foot per year. Farmers and locals have also been overpumping the Corcoran clay aquifer layer beneath the surface of the ground for centuries. As a result, the clay becomes unable to withstand the weight of the land above it and is compacted, which makes it incapable of storing water ever again. That is to say, not only did the Central Valley region's irresponsible water extraction cause Tulare Lake to vanish, but it is also literally sinking the earth and making it impossible for water to be sustainably stored in the area. Meanwhile, salinity intrusion plagued the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta, particularly in the early 20th century. This meant that during high tide, salt water from San Francisco Bay would seep into the delta and Suisun Bay. Fresh water in the related water systems may get tainted with salt water from the ocean due to salinity intrusion, rendering the water unfit for drinking, agricultural use, or crop cultivation. Since the disappearance of the lake, the Tulare Basin has experienced periodic flooding during exceptionally rainy years, and times when the Sierra Nevada mountains received substantial snowfall. The Tulare Lake bed was last flooded in the years of 1969, 1983, and 1997. The floods of 1983, driven by an exceptionally high amount of precipitation and melting, submerged around 82,000 acres of land in water. The waters of a refilled Tulare Lake reached the Corcoran city boundaries in 1983 due to flooding. Though the Tulare Lake bed remained dry for most of the 20th century, in 2023, Tulare Lake has made an unexpected return, and researchers expect to see similar rates of flooding. The Tulare Basin is normally controlled by evaporation ponds, pumps, and levees. However, these systems are being overwhelmed by the amount of precipitation and runoff. Consequently, it will take a very long time for the snow to completely melt and reach the Tulare Basin because there is so much of it in the Sierras. But levees have already started to breach. It has flooded a large area of farmland and forced many farmers to take personal responsibility for managing floods and safeguarding their crops. Since the levees are already saturated and are being pushed upon by persistently rising water, it is anticipated that they will continue to breach. It was unexpected that the San Joaquin Valley would have such copious rain and snow in 2023, after nearly 10 years of severe drought. As a result, there has been severe runoff and flooding in an ecosystem that was not equipped to handle a large amount of precipitation. Because of the land's sinking and dwindling aquifers, less water could be stored as groundwater, resulting in impermeable surfaces that might flood and stand water. And since Tulare Lake vanished, there is no natural runoff drainage, making it difficult to move the water. The reemergence of Tulare Lake has created a serious hazard as of right now, and the lake's volume already exceeds that of nearly all of California's reservoirs. Because of this, flooding is predicted, with the potential to inflict billions of dollars worth of economic damage and uproot thousands of locals and farm workers. Many of these locals and farmers are undocumented immigrants who will be unable to access government assistance or unemployment benefits in the event of the flood. Preliminary estimates indicate that the inundation of the Tulare Basin is expected to deal a severe blow to Kings County's $2 billion agricultural sector, which is home to 152,000 people. And so far, the flooding in Tulare County has already caused damage to almost 900 structures. In order to be ready for any tragedy, teams from the California Department of Forestry and Fire Prevention have also been put on the scene. As of right now, hundreds of homes and farms have been destroyed, and numerous towns have already been evacuated. In the future, cooperation between the state of California, nearby towns, and local citizens intends to safeguard residences, farms, and communities. It is important to note that the lake is a striking illustration of how changing climates and natural forces may have terrible consequences, especially when natural environments have been mishandled by human activity. Therefore, it is not a surprise that people are still affected by decisions made centuries ago. And this trend is probably going to continue until people understand how important it is to cultivate and preserve land rather than exploit and deplete it. And that concludes the fascinating tale of a lake that disappeared for a century and is now re-emerging. A testament to the ever-changing canvas of our planet. These explorations into geography and geopolitics take a lot of research, creativity, and effort to bring to light. If you found this journey intriguing, we'd greatly appreciate your support with a like and by subscribing to Geomore. Until next time.